All right. Hey, everybody. This is Other Side of Hurt podcast, and I am here with my friend Dave. Dave has agreed to come in and just share some of his story. And so here we are. So glad you're joining us today. Dave, we've known each other for, I don't know, 8-9 years.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
You were, so I was the long-term pastor here in Pine River, and you were the superintendent.
Of schools for Pine River Backus Schools.
Yeah. What year did you become superintendent?
Oh, gosh. Now you're asking. You started with a tough question right off the bat. Well, I left there about 4 years ago, and I was there for 4 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, that was 8-9 years ago.
So about 15 to 19 probably.
Excellent.
In there.
Yeah. And we got to be friends working together in the community, kind of always rubbing shoulders
Always
here and there.
Enjoyed spending time with you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. And just being in a small town, like working together is just a fun thing. But the reason that I wanted to have you on the podcast is we had a phone call just a few weeks ago, and regarding some of the things you're working on right now and just some cool things that you're doing. But the cool things you're doing really has come out of a lot of hardship. And so I was just like, would you be willing to come on and talk about your situation, your brother and all that? And so you agreed to come. So just want to hear your story today. So would it be okay, maybe just starting out telling about your brother? Because the story is about your brother.
Yeah.
Tell about your relationship with him.
Sure.
And maybe some of the things that you've ran into.
Right. Well, yeah, my brother's name was Christopher, and he was 7 years younger than I was. So I would love to tell you we were really close, but the fact of the matter is, when I went to college, my family moved from Iowa to Kansas, and I was up in Moorhead, Minnesota. So I saw my brother very little in his formative years. I can't tell you we were really close, but at that time, we did have some time together at Luther Crest Bible Camp. I was working there, and he came up to spend a few days with us and ended up spending the rest of the summer there. And then he ended up working there quite a few summers after that.
Just the two of you in the family? Or
no, we got two sisters.
Okay.
Yep. So, and all of us ended up going to Luther Crest at one time or another, which for a non-Lutheran family, that's not bad, you know?
Nice.
So anyway, he ended up going into education. He was a teacher and a coach. In fact, he was the first coach to ever take a volleyball team to state at Mora High School.
Okay. Nice.
Very successful. And then he moved into administration and was a school principal down in the metro area in a number of places. Has a family, was married, had 3 children. Okay. And
you guys had similar paths because you were education and
my dad was our dad was an educator. I got into education later. I swore I'd never become a teacher or a principal or a superintendent. And obviously I must lie a lot, but
fair enough.
But he went into education right out of high school and got his degree. I went back a little later. We did end up both teaching in Mora for a few years together and coached together.
Okay. Nice.
Same year he took a team to state in volleyball. I took the first and only team to go to state in basketball.
Wow.
Had a lot to do with the athletes we had between the two of us. So we had those kind of shared experiences.
Nice.
And then he moved down to the cities. And in the last few years of his life, I honestly don't know if I totally understand all the issues, but he ran into some significant financial issues somehow. Don't know why.
Okay.
And in the midst of that, ended up doing a number of things that were illegal and wrong. Yeah. Committed, I think it was 5 or 6 felonies he got charged with, and was sent away to prison for, I think it was 6.5 years was the initial sentence. And obviously, and did attempt suicide in the process before he went to prison. Okay. It was unsuccessful. This probably turns a dark story into a bad humor moment, but the Endicott family does not have guns, does not know how to use guns, and he bought a rifle and bullets and bought the wrong bullets. And thank God it got jammed, and he ended up surviving that. Wow. And then ended up going to prison. We kind of became close during that time, to be honest.
Really?
I went and visited him at least once a month and try to get there 2 or 3 times a month. He was in St. Cloud for a while. And then he was in a couple of other places along the way. He ended up joining getting into a program, they call it a boot camp program that the prison system has in place, that basically you go through a really strict, hard boot camp program. You're up at Reveille in the morning, you're marching, calisthenics, total military style training. They usually offer an education component. He had a master's plus 60, so there wasn't a lot of education they could give him.
Sure.
But he ended up, and if you pass through that, you end up getting basically your sentence reduced, or you get released
Early release of some
to
sort.
kind of a at-home imprisonment, so to speak.
Okay.
So he made it through. He got out of that.
Okay.
We went and picked him up, had a big celebration. He wanted a hamburger and a Coke, and we stopped in the town he was at and got a hamburger and a Coke and moved him into our house. And a lot of his issues were with cybercrime and a lot of technology stuff, some identity theft stuff, those kinds of things.
Okay.
Well, about a week into being at our house, and he was just getting ready to start a job actually at Lonesome Cottage, he broke into his at that time his ex-wife now, broke into her Instagram account. Didn't do anything, just the curiosity of what her life was
Seeing where
overcame him,
Okay.
as my understanding.
Yeah.
And in my mind too is credit. And again, I got a brother's bias here. He turned himself in. He admitted to his officer that was in charge of his program and his release. He admitted it to his wife, or his ex-wife, that he had done this, and that obviously violated a condition of his release. They waited a few days and waited and actually until he went to work the first day, and went into his workplace and brought 7 police officers in and took him in and put him in the Crow Wing County Jail.
Okay.
At that time, nobody was real sure. Was he under the state prison jurisdiction? Was he under Crow Wing County? Dakota County is the county his ex-wife lived in. They're the ones that arrested him. So there was this big, long waiting period. And unfortunately, during the course of that time, he just lost hope. And, that we can talk about that more. But I found that to be the most difficult part in being a supportive person who loved this person, was I couldn't figure out how to give him that hope.
Yeah.
And so then on a Saturday morning, I was actually down speaking at a conference. I got the call from my wife that he had hung himself in the jail. And so that's kind of where the story ends and starts in many respects.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. I want to go back just a little bit, because I remember the first time we had a conversation about this, like in the midst of it, was whenever he was originally arrested, and he was a public person, right? I mean, he's a school administrator. So, when you're a teacher, educator, people know you, you're in the community and that kind of stuff. So it was pretty public, right? I mean,
it was front page, Star Tribune, Pioneer Press. He was on the news in every Twin Cities news station. It was the lead story for a number of times over the different arrests. He had different charges. There's one video of me picking him up from his first time going to court before he was put into prison. And I basically had to pull the truck up surrounded by media. And he had to run in, get in the car. I literally had to shut the door with a camera and a microphone in my face and just drive off and try to get him out of the chaos that was. So there was a lot of that. And, the part that really hurt, I get why they have to do it. It's news. I get that's their job. His kids, I just can't even imagine what they had to be living through. At that time, they were probably, 12, 14, and 16, somewhere around there. Yeah. So you just always think about, I still advocate now. I've seen a few posts on Facebook from friends that are celebrating that somebody got in trouble with the law because they were bad people in their mind or whatever. And I'm like, I get that you feel that way, but you also need to understand there's kids involved here and they don't deserve any of that.
And it is complicated because in some ways, I've never heard you say well, your brother should have gotten away with it. It's not like you're appealing for his innocence, but at the same time, you love your brother and you're a public position. And so just the association, that's a lot of stuff. So I don't know. I was just kind of curious, how was walking through that with your brother as somebody you love, but also somebody who's in the public eye, who's going through difficult. I mean, that's just a really hard spot to be, Dave. There
was a lot of layers. I remember going to a superintendent conference shortly after all of this broke in the news, and had one of our best friends, a shared mutual friend who was a school administrator, go, I can't sit with you. Because his school district was involved in the legal issues that were going on. He wasn't trying to be bad.
Oh, just like a conflict of interest thing.
He just couldn't put himself in that situation. And I remember, and you don't know how much of it is your own being overly sensitive to things, and how much of it is reality. my perception was that people were avoiding me that whole conference because they didn't want to be associated with the same last name. The Endicott last name was prevalent in the news, and I was in a similar position. I was a superintendent at the time, and he was a principal, but it was a school administrator with that name. And so, and realizing too that if I ever decided I wanted to get a superintendent job in the metro area, I would never be considered.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't afford the PR of having that name.
Yeah. Wow.
You know, and they're not wrong there. It just was one of those crap.
You know? Right. When you like, and you didn't do anything, and it's not like you were involved in any of this, but like you're associated with him just because you're his brother, and you were like trying to walk with him in this time as you should,
trying to show as much love and grace and forgiveness as you possibly could.
Yeah.
There were certainly moments where I'd sit him down and basically scolding my 5-year-old in some respects, because it was like, dude, what are you doing? He was brilliant. I mean, he was as smart as anybody I've ever met in my life. And it's like, how can you be doing so many dumb things when you're this smart? But in the same hand, you know, it was that conversation. I remember one conversation vividly after he admitted that he had broken in to his wife's Instagram. And I came home, I was livid. I mean, I was so mad at him, and I'm like, what are you doing? And I finally said, I don't think you get how much we all love you. I don't think you know how much we want you to have a good life. And we need you to come with us on this. And he's breaking down in tears. I know. I don't know why. And I don't think he just didn't have control of the crisis in his mind at that point, you know? So,
man. And so he kind of was able to receive that, but not really receive it or something like that.
You know, we both come from faith-based experiences and our own faith journeys. I don't know that he could ever get himself to forgive himself and to accept the grace that God was giving him. I just don't think he ever got there, as much as, and you'd like to be able to shove it down somebody's throat, and you can't. You just can't. You can demonstrate it, you can show it, you can express it, you can offer your home, you can offer all those things. And the fact of the matter is, it's up to God and him. Yeah. And thank God it is, because if it's just me, then the Lord knows it's going to get screwed up.
Yeah, but we carry that, don't we? I mean, that's the, because I know just knowing you the last 8 years, is that what we deserved? 8 years,
something
roughly?
like that. Yeah.
I know you've got a heart for people, and like you and I have that similar challenge of like when you care about people and yet they're stuck or they don't seem to be changing or they're not open. That's a really hard thing, and I can imagine, especially when it's somebody that, you know, is your family, somebody that you would give whatever you could for in a helpful way. So I think that is a really difficult thing. You would do whatever, but it's like you can't get through to.
Yeah. And well, and at that time, my wife and I were all he had. His family was pretty much separated from the situation. He got to talk to his kids once in a while, but he never saw them in person, except I think one time after he got released. And that was it in about a 4-year period.
Oh man.
You know, he saw them on video from the prison, but once or twice, but they never visited the jail and those kinds of things. So he had that separation. Most of his friends had kind of cut ties or didn't know how to. I think less that they didn't care, more that they didn't know how to care.
Oh yeah.
Kind of a moment. So, you know, there was a few friends that were sending him letters and reaching out to him that way while he was in prison. But the reality is, physically speaking, the only people that were there for him were Esther and I. And so, when you do say, God, I can't get him to understand this, you do feel that pressure, because at that point, I and Esther were the only ones that could even bring that to the table. You know, so,
And then you feel like you're carrying the weight and trying to restore. And
I'm sure I was not in a good place mentally at the same time. I mean, I'm sure the pressures, I think of when I was working at the school, there was a couple of meetings where I know I was short-tempered, which isn't my general nature.
Right.
And I know that was because the stress of all of those things was overriding my normal reaction to different situations and people. And, you know, it was, I mean, I can remember about lost a friendship because of how I handled the situation, and it was on me. And we were able to rebuild that. And hopefully, I think they understood that was not the norm, but in the midst of all of that was going on with my brother, I wasn't in a good place either, you know?
You don't strike me as somebody who can fake it very well. Like you know.
No.
Yeah, you carry your heart pretty close to the vest,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
that's a good thing. That's a good thing, but it can be a complicated thing. So
yeah, I've learned as I've gotten older to show a little filter on some of that. So yeah.
Well, I can imagine too with your brother. Like again, I didn't know him or the situation, but I'm sure by the time you get to this point where it's crisis and it's public and you're facing multiple felonies and all that, you're in pretty deep, and that's pretty hard to work your way out of, I suppose, right? I mean, that's the way, like, brokenness often comes as the further we get into it, the harder it is for us to maybe see our way out of it, even if other people are there to tell us, because it's a hard thing to dig yourself out of in any way. Well, and maybe you can't. Maybe that's where the grace of God is absolutely necessary for you to be restored.
Yeah. You know, I don't remember ever having a time where I wanted out of it. I had
for me. I'm just thinking of
for
him.
Yeah, absolutely. For him, absolutely.
Yeah.
I wanted it.
So
to
you were
end for
able
him.
you were able to separate or walk with him and not feel.
I just knew I was in the midst of it, and I was going to have to be in the
Yeah.
midst of it, and that's what I was supposed to be.
Yeah.
It was never well, crap. I wish one of my sisters would step up and take
Yeah.
their turn. You know,
Yeah,
that wasn't even possible, and it wasn't a thought. It was just no. This is my time to be here for him and to do what I can. And I prayed and prayed and prayed that somehow that light would shine and he could get through this and find a new life. You know, and he just couldn't see that light at that time.
Well, and you've got Esther, you've got your kids, you've got good, and you've got, respect in the community. You've got your name, your reputation, your career, these kinds of things. You had a lot of, God's blessed you, and you've got a lot of things going for you.
Absolutely.
But I can imagine your brother at that point where you lose so many things. It's really hard to find hope, or it's really hard to dig out after you've been broken for so long. And it's just really sad that he, even in your ministry to him, your love for him, that he never really, or he maybe saw glimpses but never grasped it.
And I hadn't thought of this until just now when you're saying all those. Been abundantly blessed. Esther and I have just had this amazing life and continue to. That might have been part of the problem for him. I don't know. He never said that, but maybe there was a piece of, well, how come it's good for you and I didn't have that life, Now, in my mind, those were choices he made to make that happen. But, and I've said all along, I will never, Chris has to own the actions he did, and he has to own his own death. Yeah. I will never take those as mine. I feel terrible that that's the world he lived in the last few years. And I certainly, if I could have had a way to fix it, God knows I would have done it. I would have gone to the end of the earth to do it. But I didn't have that, and it wasn't there.
Part of what we're hoping to do on this podcast is have these conversations that there's like no answer to, like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like just these impossible things, like, and I've thought about you a lot of just, it's a complicated thing to love somebody that is publicly been broken, and yet to keep, but we were talking about this a little bit earlier before we started recording of like, people knew him as like what he had done, and they saw him at the lowest of the low. But I'm also like, he's your brother. You loved him. Like, you had a lot of good things there too. He wasn't like, nobody is so simplistic that they are just the evil that they've done, or the terrible mistakes that they've made, or the poor choices. It's like, they're complicated. They're more than that.
Yeah.
None of us are perfect. Like, you and I are here because we have much better wives than what, like
right. Married way above my species. Exactly.
But anyway, that's just something I've always thought just like really interesting or difficult with you, is like walking with your brother in the obviously the most hardest point of his life, and what that was like. And
it was. We talked about this before. I'm reading William Kent Kruger, Minnesota-based author, and last night I was reading a section where they talked about, people are broken and blessed, and very true, I think, of all of us to some degree. We all have some brokenness. We've all got these blessings, and we weren't able to get Chris to see beyond the brokenness to the blessing in some respects. But it was hard because, I would say, we've talked about this too, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of the things we've been doing since his death. But one of the tougher pieces for me, certainly dealing with his death, has been difficult. Maybe more difficult for me has been dealing with what everybody thinks he was based on his last few years. And the fact is, he was a wonderful father. He was a wonderful husband for many, many years. He was a wonderful teacher and coach and administrator. And the last few years, he threw those things away. And so it's hard for people to understand. Most dads will build a swing set for their kid. My brother put a sling, or what do you call that when you ride down the steel wire?
Like a zip line?
Zip line. He puts a zip line in his backyard.
Yeah.
And he was always that go big or go home kind of guy. And, I think I said this at his funeral, but when he decided he couldn't go big anymore, he decided to go home. And home for him was, I'm hoping and praying that's heaven.
Yeah.
And so that's the guy I hope more people get to know that was there. It's been, when we started some of the Camp Christopher stuff that we'll talk about.
Yeah.
It's been fun. I've had a few of his former players, former students send some emails and go, you need to know your brother really made an impact in my life. That has brought me to tears so many times.
Yeah.
Because I needed to hear that there were people that still loved him, respected him, found value in him, because there's a lot of people that don't. And that was really, doesn't do anything for him right now, but it means a whole heck of a lot for me right now.
Yeah.
So when, a young lady says, I had your brother as a teacher and a coach, and I was this shy kid that was just not sure if I had any value in life, and he's the one that convinced me I did. Whoa.
Yeah.
Blow me away, So that's my hope and prayer, is that we can somehow still build some of that knowledge to people that this guy had some redeeming qualities.
Yeah.
He had some qualities that weren't so redeeming, as we all do, but, and his were more public than the norm.
Yeah.
But, so that journey's been, I would say, a difficult one. But there's been those glimmers of hope and light that shine through in some of that.
Good. I appreciate you sharing that, because what we were just talking, I really like these like longer form discussions, because you get through the sound bites, and I'm sure even with your brother, it's really easy just to kind of sound bite his life by certain things. And not that you would, I don't think like you're coming on here in any way saying like, oh yeah, no, like all that stuff was okay. But it's people are very broken by sin in the world and all the things. But there's also, we retain a glory of God about us. And so there are these moments in the past of the student or the impact that he made. And like, there were certain things that were really redeeming in his life. And, but it's easy, I think, in our culture in this time, just to gloss over all of that to and just forget like, well, this person was loved, and this person was created in the image of God and had value. And he really messed up at the end of his life and really made some bad choices, and we don't want to disregard those. But from his brother's perspective, that's a complicated thing. And to hear from people that like still remember the guy that you loved and who he was is really valuable.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot more years of positive impact than the negative stuff. So, and like you said, we live in a media world that only focuses on one. It always frustrates me, because it doesn't matter I don't care which side of the aisle or whatever you're playing the game with. We pick this one side, and it's all this or all this, and there's never this kind of middle ground of there's good and bad in all of us, and there's pieces we can pick apart, no matter how we look at it. But really, I think we're called to just love and celebrate the really good things in people, and bring as much hope and joy as we can, and love, grace, all that stuff is just, I've got to live that way. And if I don't, then I'm putting myself in my own mental health hole. And that's what I hope. My brother got a glimpse of that before he passed.
Yeah.
I think he did, but I also have never been in that dark of a hole myself. I've been depressed. I've been through I'm guessing all of us have to some degree been through those tough mental health challenges, but I've never been in that hole where I'm going, I don't know if I can live life anymore. Yeah. I've never been there. So for me to understand, it's easy for me to step back and go, oh, man, why couldn't you just see? We could have gotten you there. I don't know how deep he was. And after reading the note that he had in a book that was his suicide note, essentially, we got it a number of months afterwards.
Oh, man.
After reading that, I really became aware of how deep a psychosis he was suffering from, and maybe for a lot longer time than I was aware. Sure. And so I don't know if that makes it better, but it gives me a better understanding, maybe.
Yeah. Man. Well, and I think one of the reminders is no matter what we do, we're limited in our scope, our outreach.
Yeah.
Like, because I mean, I remember we weren't like walking with you closely in this, but we interacted some, and I knew you were helping your brother and all this. In fact,
you donated a car.
Like
You seem to be happy about getting into the car. I'm not going to lie.
Let's just say this: when you say we donated a car, let's contextualize this because. No, the church that I served as pastor, it had been donated to the church like 13 years prior or something.
Yep.
So it was like our company car that was all rusted out and falling apart. And it was like getting to the point where it was like, what are we going to do with this thing? It needs to be gotten rid of. Now I'm a small town guy, and like my minivan is like, it's like 30% rust at this point. Like that's like, the 30% might be a low number, but I don't really care. But I knew, well, your brother needed a car to get to work and all that kind of stuff. And we were like, we've got this car. Like, let's give it, so it wasn't a great, but the church, church is super generous but yeah, that was right at that time. And then I heard, so we walked with you a little bit in that, but.
Well, and interesting with that car, that brings up a whole nother story.
Yeah.
You know me, I'm a storyteller, so you're going to get them whether you like them or not. But, so obviously after my brother passed, that car, and we put a few bucks into it to get it up and running. It was far from a beautiful machine, but it was running. It would get him to where he needed to get.
It wasn't quite Fred Flintstone where you had to like run with it.
But we're not quite there. But through the story of my brother, I think it was one of my wife's friends from her yarn store here in Pine River, had a brother that just got out of prison from the same program that my brother was in and needed a vehicle.
Oh, wow.
And we donated it to them.
Cool.
And I think to this day, he's still driving that thing.
Nice.
And he needed it to get to a job. And he knew my brother from the same boot camp program at, I think it was Willow River or Moose Lake prison. And so, somehow God still moves you through these moments, right? Yeah.
That's great. I like to think that car is still running somewhere. It would be miraculous.
I'm almost positive it is. So
it actually had a good motor in it, but it was
all good.
Well, hey, so I mean, your story in a lot of ways is like loving your brother, and no matter what you did, it's still like it didn't ultimately fix him or I don't know, whatever. Like which we don't. But when we were on the phone the other day, I was like, tell me about this Camp Christopher thing, which I had just seen on social media. In New Year, and then of course with us doing Smile Again now, and just kind of weird, kind of similar trajectories in some ways. And so I was like wanting to hear. And so that was really fascinating. And so you were telling me about that. And I'm like, okay, you got to come on our podcast and just tell us all about this. So
yeah, I'd love to. It's been an amazing story for Esther and I. So for years, the North Shore in that area has been kind of, for Esther and I, it's just that got that vibe. It's that place. I write some poetry. It's where most of my poetry gets written.
Nice.
Because there's just
North Shore of Lake Superior, just in case you're not a Minnesotan following this.
Oh yes,
the North Shore of Lake Superior,
North Shore of Lake Superior, kind
very
of in
beautiful,
the northeastern Minnesota region, and gorgeous area. And it's just been where we've gone for most of our anniversaries, where we just love to go camping and just experience God's beauty and creation.
It is the best place, and like that's where Jill and I went for our honeymoon.
Oh yeah,
because I'm from Ohio, and within about a 6-hour drive of where I'm from, Ohio, you could be at the East Coast. You could be there's a lot of places you can go. In Minnesota, like a 6-hour drive, we realized is like Wisconsin, South Dakota, North Dakota, Iowa. Right? So the North Shore is like it's like that's only 3 hours, and it is beautiful up in that area.
Gorgeous. So for many years, we've been looking for a piece of land with a river. I've always wanted a place with a river running through it. For whatever reason, I don't have any good reason.
Okay.
It just has been a thing.
Nice.
And so I've been looking for many years. I sell real estate on the side. And so I'm able to kind of follow different listings. And there's this one spot that kind of kept popping up. It's not on the North Shore. It's outside of Cotton, Minnesota, which is kind of halfway between Duluth and Virginia. It's about 30 minutes from Duluth, going northwest from there. Mm-hmm. And an easy drive to the North Shore and up to Ely. And I mean, it's kind of a cool location. So I decided for my wife's birthday last year, which is coming up in just a couple of weeks, so you'll have to remind me, that I was going to buy this piece of land for her. And so I did, went and closed on it in March. And as I was driving home from closing, signing the papers to buy, it's 11 acres on this little river, the Paleface River, figured out we're not going to get to use this very much. We live on the farm where my wife grew up. My wife primarily is a caretaker for her mom, who's 91 years old, lives in the old farmhouse. We built a yurt right next to it and live in the yurt.
I need to see that yet.
We got to get you over there for sure. And just, I'm going, we're just not going to get up there. We have a little teardrop camper that we love to go camping in. And this place has electricity. It doesn't have running water, that kind of thing, but we'd figure that out. We'd be fine. And so as I was driving home, I'm going, that'd be a shame for this beautiful property not to get used. So I went home, and as is typical me, and my wife would be rolling her eyes right now, I just decided on a whim to put a Facebook post out that just said, hey, if you've been impacted by suicide, mental health, and need a place of respite to hope, pray, grieve, cry, sing, whatever it is you need to do on your journey, we offer our space for free. And I thought, because there's no running water, we're going to have a porta potty there.
Right.
Probably not going to get a lot of interest. And I figured it'd be like a typical Facebook post of mine. 10 friends will read it. 5 will make a stupid comment and we'd be done. Well, the post got shared 10,000 times.
10,000 times. That's
and
awesome.
In the period of about 10 days, we filled every single day from the middle of May to the middle of October. Wow. We saved one weekend a month for us. But other than that, it was booked. And not one single person that booked the place was somebody we knew.
Really?
It was all people that had their own story of grief, loss, mental health struggles, whatever it may be. We placed no parameters on it. You didn't have to prove anything. You didn't have to. Yeah. It was just, this is yours. Go for it. We have been, I should have brought up some of them with, I bet I had probably 150 to 200 emails, either through Facebook, through we started a web page, had a guy volunteer to create a web page for us.
Wow.
I manage it, but he was able to get the shell going and that kind of thing. Through that site, through our Facebook, I can't even tell you all this, and heartbreaking and yet beautiful in so many ways. I remember one woman whose husband had died by suicide just a few days before. And she's emailing me and I'm like, oh, hon, this, but she said, I just need you to know that you offering this space, even though I can't go, has given me hope and given me something to look to. And we've heard that story over and over again. I've had FaceTime chats with a young person up by the Duluth area. He identifies as trans and just needed someone to talk to. He's 20 something. We have zero in common. And we had a 45-minute conversation, just me listening and hearing him talk about, and he has a dream someday of finding some land up by the North Shore that he can share. And so we just shared that vision and dream together. And it's been people from all walks of life, from all sides of aisles, from all, you name it. And they've all just shared, and we've had people that have volunteered to mow lawn. We've had people donate firewood. We've had people plant flowers. People, I mean, the list goes on and on. The school in Cotton was closed in 2009, I think. And the community's kind of taken it over. I think some of the churches in the area and other community members have made it kind of a social service hub. They've got a thrift store. They've got a little mercantile. They got a little coffee shop. They offer some community meals every now and then. They've got a gym that they use for pickleball for their elders.
Oh, nice.
And they offered free showers and free water for anybody that camped at our space. And it's 3 miles away.
Wow.
And just out of the generosity. And we always go in. Every time we stop, we love going in there, visiting with people, buying stuff we probably don't need, but just wanting to support the great work they're doing in their community. The community there has blown us away. Just been unbelievably giving. And so, it's been, we talked about this before. It certainly has been a huge part of the healing process for Esther and I. Pray that it's created, and I know it has based on what people have shared. I think it's also giving others that space. There's something about being in nature, something about that healing process that happens. There was 2 sisters that had lost a brother to suicide a number of years ago. This was their first time going and just being together and living that a little bit and grieving that together. Had the most marvelous time. We're coming back next. We're making this an annual event.
Really?
And those are just, the stories go on and on and on. And it's just been amazing. And for Esther and I, we go up there and it's just this place that grabs you and just, you just feel it. And it's hard to put into words. Probably one of my favorite memories, we named it Camp Christopher, is on Mother's Day, we took both our moms up there. Now, her was 90 at the time and doesn't get around or out very much.
Sure.
My mom will be turning 80 shortly, and her son.
Right.
That's something we could talk about. Is in the midst of my focused on my own loss, my mom lost a child.
Yeah.
And which I can't even fathom. You can. I don't know what that. So we went up and on Mother's Day and we planted a tree. And my family history is we're related to John Endicott, who is the first governor of the colony of Massachusetts. Came over.
Oh, really?
Came over during the Mayflower days, basically.
Wow. First governor of
the colony of Massachusetts before it became a state.
Wow.
And he planted a pear tree that he brought over from England outside of Boston, and it is still alive today.
Really?
It is the oldest living fruit-bearing tree in the North American continent. And one of my cousins that I don't know, that's a distant, 18th cousin somewhere, that's a horticulturist in Oklahoma, has made grafts from it and sells these to people in the genealogy group for John Endicott, which I'm a member of. And so we planted an Endicott pear tree up at Camp Christopher in memory of my brother. So my mom got to be there and help plant the tree, and the tears and that. I don't think my mom's not one. She's not like me at all. She doesn't share her emotions. She doesn't wear those on her heart.
Okay.
Everything is buried. For once, she let that out. And it was just one of those beautiful, okay.
Wow.
Out of the tragedy that was my brother's death and his last few years of life has come some just beautiful light and hope. And I'm so thankful and grateful that that's been the story.
Man, yeah, what a beautiful, there's a lot there to unpack, but that's just fantastic.
Yeah.
And are you starting to book up for this summer already?
Yeah. We opened them up in January, not booking as quick as it did last year, but I think part of that's just timing. I think when we get to March and April, we'll see that happen. We're getting quite a few booked. It's just a cool place. It's got some trails. We've got 11 acres, most of it wooded.
Cool. Yeah.
Some open area. And there's a deck we put a screen gazebo up. We bought a shed that we've got a riding mower and a push mower, and that was left there by the previous owner, and got them up and running. Nice. And then people have kept doing, I don't even know how much has been donated in that shed for other people to use down the road. There's coolers. Yeah,
you said they just kind of pay it forward. People come and they mow and they take care of it.
Yeah, because there was people on the Facebook that were like, "Well, I hope nobody destroys this land and nobody did." Blah, blah. They had all the negative connotations, and and other people just shut that down immediately. It was really kind of cool. It's like people really love what he and his wife are doing. We're going to take care of this place.
Yeah.
Well, the first couple came, and I think they both had lost. Like one had lost an uncle, one had lost a sibling. And they came, and younger couple, and there was this big pile of just kind of junk. Some of it firewood, some of it hoses, metal, that the previous owner had left. Cleaned all of that up, took all of the wood, and by hand split all the wood and stacked enough wood that lasted the whole summer.
Nice.
And it was like, oh my gosh, how beautiful is that? Well, the next couple comes, and they start planting flowers. They mow the lawn I'm thinking I'm going to have to drive 2.5 hours to mow lawn every so often, They mow the lawn, do some different stuff. The next couple comes, and they started doing painted rock memorial kind of things.
Oh, cool.
So they left paints for people to paint more rocks for later on.
Nice.
And then and it's just been one thing after another.
It's so cool. It's just happened. It's been organic. It's
totally
not been planned
organic.
out.
Yeah, it's a good word for it.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'll try to put a link to the website below. When we post this.
CampChrisCotton.com.
Cool.
And we've got a Facebook page as well. So,
cool. Excellent. Yeah. Check that out. No, and I think, we were talking about this a little bit before we came on the air of thinking about suicide, which is just such a tragedy and so hard because, and we were talking about this, it's such a catch-22 because anybody who's watching this video right now, there's some people who've lost through suicide, and you want them to hear this message of whatever you did or failed to do, you can't carry all that. This world is broken. I think of your brother, no matter what could more have you done? Well, you could play that game all day long of
totally.
Try to fix the situation. And there's some things that you just can't, you're not big enough. You're not strong enough, but then through tragic loss, these kind of this redemptive work has started through you and Esther and what you're doing, which is a beautiful thing. There's still hope. There's, God doing something through you to other families and other people that doesn't. You'd rather have your brother. I'm sure. Right.
Yeah. Right.
But you don't get to choose that, but you know, the way God's using you in this is a really beautiful thing.
I don't know if there's good words for it, but you know, the God is good all the time thing. We've lived it, and we've seen the sad side of some of that, but we've seen more of the hope and more of the light from it than some days you feel guilty. Like, should we really be getting blessed by my brother's death? It's a weird feeling sometimes.
Yeah.
Most of the time it doesn't hit me too hard, but you do have that every now and then. It's like, no, what's worse is having a tragic situation like my brother's and letting it just fester and provide no benefit down the road to others, versus just 2 days ago, I got an email, a young man that had used Camp Chris last year. And he's like, I'm really in kind of a dark place again, and I need to go again. Could I book for middle of April? And I'm like, well, if, hopefully you don't get a ton of snow up there at that time, because we're not plowing it. But if so, yeah, we'll get the porta potty there in time, and we'll get that taken care of. I'm so thankful that a person that could be looking at, maybe he's considering suicide. Maybe he's I don't know where he's at in that dark struggle, but he's willing to say, I know a safe place. And that's what's probably been the biggest aha in all of this with Camp Christopher. And I should have known this as a superintendent of schools, but I missed it. The desperate need for a safe space for people to share their grief, and suicide in particular is such a difficult thing for people to talk about, whether it's their own feelings or losing or possibly losing another. We somehow, it's a totally act of God. This has nothing to do with Hester and I intent. There was people have called for interviews saying, so was this intentionally set up this? No, pretty much bought it just selfishly for my own little camping spot. And this accidentally happened. And it's not an accident. I mean, God took it and did it. But we somehow created that space, and somehow by the wording that I used in the Facebook post, and it was not thought out. It was not one of those where I wrote it out 3 times, made sure I got it right. It was a spur of the moment, spit it out. Yeah. Here's what it is. Somehow that created that space for people to say, this is safe. And I'm able to share my story, even if they're not going to Camp Chris, because the stories they've shared have been so intimate, so personal, and yet they've felt that it's okay to do that. They felt safe to do that. And I don't think we provide those. I think as a church, as a community, I think we sometimes fail to create those spaces in that way. Yeah.
Well, and these are hardest things, right? They're very difficult. Because even one of the things we talked about, like suicide is such a catch-22, because like for those who've suffered the loss of a friend, you don't want them carrying, you want them to find hope. You don't want them carrying too much of responsibility or whatever. Yeah. But anybody who's watching this that's thinking about suicide, you want to tell them, like, look, there's more going on. Like, don't give in, because like there's a bigger story. There is a hope of redemption.
You're worth it. There's all the, and they sound trite sayings, but there's reality to them. Yeah. You are worth it. You are loved, probably more than you ever understand or experience. And yet it's just words. And so, and I know this is you, because I've seen you in your faith, and you're a person of action. The words certainly are important, but the actions are more important. That's where I think we feel good that we haven't talked about it. We've just done it.
Yeah. You're just making it available.
And I'm grateful that that's what happened.
Yeah. That's great. Well, we're glad you're doing it, and it's fun to hear about what you're doing, and how we're doing something different but similar in some things,
right?
And so that's just kind of interesting for me, like just to see what you guys are doing and how God's working in that, and how people are using it and taking responsibility. It's
been
great stuff.
Miraculous, really, in a lot of ways, and to see the healing with my mom. We got my daughters and their husbands up there. Had a family get together there. Really cool. I think for them to see their Uncle Chris was a cool guy for them. And they were out of the house and kind of gone when he was going through his stuff. So for them to see a piece of him in that way is really positive as well. And we just, we've been, we're broken and blessed. Like I said, it's, there's some brokenness in all that happened there, but man, the abundance of the blessings have been way beyond what we certainly deserve.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming on because I think this is the kind of stuff we want to explore and think about and talk about, which is like really hard and complicated and difficult things and sad things, but also like to hear like there's some redemptive things happening. There's some beautiful things. God is still at work, but it's not easy and it's not simple. But thanks for doing what you're doing, and I'm sure most of it's Esther. Let's just be honest.
No doubt about that. No doubt about that. Yeah, I guess if I were to add anything to it, I think what it's really taught me is I need to sit down and listen and understand another person's story, because there's some stories I've been told that I would not have understood and probably would have even gone, these folks are nuts. They're not. They've got a reason for their story. And if I really sit down and listen and try to understand that, what a far better person I've become and what a far better place this has become. Yeah. And so we've placed no judgment, nothing on it. It's whoever you are. We say it at our church at communion time, whoever you are, wherever you are, however you are welcome to the Lord's table. Well, we say that about Camp Chris. Yeah. Whoever you are, however you are, wherever you are, you're welcome. And we want you there. And if you have to cry and sit by the river and just cry your eyes out, if you need to sit and swear at the river for a while, go swear at the river for a while. If you need to pray and sing and do it and know that you're free to do that. And you're surrounded by forests and field. So you're not disturbing anybody either. So yeah.
No, it sounds like a beautiful place. We'll get sneak up there sometime.
Yeah, we're going to get to your camp too.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things you say, I think this is so true. And what we're learning in this working with broken and grieving people is you listen about 75 to 90% of the time. There's nothing I have that is profound to say, even if I think I do. And yet, even people who are terribly broken, they need to talk, they need to share. And man, I can't even put my own life together and fix my own self. Like, how can I expect to fix anybody else's situation? But somehow in offering yourself and your ears and your heart, God uses that in some ways, and in ways that we can't do it ourselves.
Yeah,
so
we're careful to let people know we're not therapists, we're not counselors. I've got people I can refer you to if you're in that place where you need that. There's people that are trained for that stuff. I'm not them. But I can certainly offer an ear, or I can offer a space and say, go, you need a ride to get to that camp? I'll be happy to take you.
That's cool.
Yeah. You need to use our camper? I'll be happy to bring it.
That's awesome.
Let's make it happen for you if that's going to be the part that brings you to a better place.
Cool, man. Well, I'll be looking forward to hearing how it goes this next couple of summers, and we'll definitely keep doing this. And
we'll get the Borland family to camp up there with us.
That sounds like way better in theory than actuality. Like,
you'll have help though.
Yeah, oh man,
Esther will be there.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll just send our baby up with Esther, and that sounds more relaxing because Josiah is like 4.5 months old. Yeah. He has been this is kid number 7 for us. He's been by far the hardest for me to deal with. Maybe I'm just getting old, Dave, and there's that. But man, camping with no water with a baby.
We might have water by that time. Okay, we're hoping to get water this summer. So there's hope for you. There's hope for you.
There's lots of things about camping that's like, it's good in theory, but like with a large family and all of that, I'm like, yeah, I don't know. But I appreciate the offer. But maybe just for me to come up by myself for like a week. That's
bring your guitar. We can have some fun.
Good. Well, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
This has been great.
Thank you so much for your time. Always good to spend time with you.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of our podcast. Please share and like and subscribe to be a part of the Other Side of Hurt community. Also, if you are somebody who has recently suffered the loss of a child, or if you know of a family, we are going to link to our website, Smile Again Grief Ministries, below. And we would love to connect with you to see if there's anything we can do as we walk together in some of the most difficult things that families go through. God bless you.